Aloha, y'all. Daniel Aaron here, your guide to vibrant living. And this is a doozy of an awesome, beautiful story. It's one that I have told before. I don't even remember where I first heard it. I love this, the way Gregg tells this here. And as he's a colleague and an author whom I respect a lot, I'm excited for y'all to hear it from him. And he's done some great research on the field, something we talk about a lot on this channel, the field of infinite possibilities, the quantum consciousness. And so I invite you to just enjoy the story and, of course, inquire into yourself about it. Like, what does it mean for you? And when you hear this, what else becomes possible for you? What else can you imagine? Because as Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Enjoy.
So I'd like to begin with a story that came to me a number of years ago, and I can't really even remember who it was that shared the story or where it came from. What I do remember is that it moved me so deeply, it brought me to tears the very first time I heard this story. And it also helped me to understand the concept of the field of energy that links all of creation in the traditions of the ancients and the implications of that concept. It's a true story of a young Jewish boy and his father in the 20th century. And as the Jewish boy was coming of age, he began to question the traditions that he had been raised in, what they meant to him and the validity of those traditions. And his father took the questioning very personally and was offended by the questioning. And the boy said to his father, "I understand I've been raised in these traditions." He said, "but I need to go out into the world and find if these traditions really hold true for me in my life. I have to see these things for myself." And the father said to him, "If you turn your back on the traditions that we have raised you within, and if you turn your back on me, I have no son, you're no longer my son." And the boy said, "I'm sorry, Father, this is what I have to do." And he did, and he left the United States, and he began to tour the world, and he went into Europe just to find out what the world was like and how his teachings would serve him in his interactions with other people. Years went by, he and his father had absolutely no contact at all. He met a girl, and they settled down, and he was living a happy life in urban society, and one day, into the cafe where they were having their coffee, a friend of his walked in from America that he had not seen since he left. And they were very happy to see one another, and the first thing that his friend said to him, to the boy, he says, "I'm so sorry to hear about the death of your father." And this is the first time the young boy had heard that his father had died. And he immediately came back to the States, and he began speaking to the people in the neighborhood and to their friends and to the family regarding his relationship with his father. And what he discovered very quickly was that his father, in fact, had never forgotten him at all. That his father had spoke of his son incessantly and how proud he was of his son, the strength and the courage that he had to go into the world and find his own way. And it brought the young boy back into the roots of his Hebrew traditions, the Jewish faith. And he says, "I'm going to go to the place where this belief system began, to where it all originated." He found himself in Jerusalem, and he went to a place where people performed their prayers on a daily basis. It's called the Wailing Wall, or the West Wall. And it's a fascinating wall, very ancient stone blocks with mortar that has held them together for many, many centuries. And the wall is so ancient that the mortar has begun to fall out in certain places. And in place of where the mortar has been, there are little tiny pieces of paper and scraps of cloth that are rolled up and stuffed into all of the little crevices and the nooks and crannies. And on each one of those pieces of cloth or paper is a prayer that someone has inscribed and placed. In the tradition that brought him back to where his roots had begun, the boy also inscribed a prayer honoring his relationship with his father. And as he scanned the wall with his eyes, searching for just the right place where he could leave his prayer to honor his relationship with his father, all of a sudden, a prayer that someone else had placed in an earlier time dropped out at his feet. And he bent down to pick this up to replace it in the wall, and as he did, he happened to notice some of the writing on the prayer. and it was the writing of his father. And he opened the prayer, and what he found was that before his death, his father had journeyed to precisely the same place and had left a prayer giving thanks for his relationship with his son and the beauty that his son brought into his life. And in that moment, the boy was brought back to his roots and to the understanding that even though his father perhaps is no longer in this world, there was still that link, there was still a communication that had occurred between them. And when I hear stories like this, while I'm not surprised, I'm always in awe. I'm in awe of the process because it tells me two things. First of all, when I share this story with others, within myself, even though I've shared it many, many times, it creates a feeling in my body, and perhaps you had that feeling as well when you heard me describe how he looked at his father's handwriting and the synchronicity of seeing that on that prayer, on a little piece of paper. And in that feeling lives a power, and it's a power that we are only beginning to understand here in the West. It's a power that transcends what we think of in our minds. It is the power of human emotion and human feeling that can only come about from a genuine experience of emotion in our hearts rather than the logic of our minds. So I'm sharing this story now to begin our program, hopefully to share with you, the listener, an idea perhaps of what that feeling is all about. The second reason that this story is so important to me is because for this kind of an event to occur, obviously there had to be some kind of communication between the young boy and his father. On some level, there was a communication there. In our world, in our Western science today, absolutely nothing allows, up until very recently, there's been nothing that allows for that kind of communication. And the question is whether the boy and his father were in the same country or not, or if the father was even in this world or not. Obviously, something happened between the two of them, and the question is, what is the conduit? What was it that was allowing that communication to transcend space and time? And for that boy to be in precisely the same place where his father had been at some time very recently, doing precisely the same ritual that his father had done, what was it that became the conduit for that experience? Well, the answer to that question and the understanding of the quality of feeling that a story like this creates in our bodies leads us into the essence of what our program is all about. Almost universally, ancient texts and traditions and our most cherished history, they tell us in the language of another time that the events of the world around us and the healing and the joy or the sadness within our bodies are directly related. That they're related in ways that in the West we've only begun to understand, on the one hand. Now, on the other hand, within the last years of the 20th century, Western science began to validate precisely such relationships. Between 1993 and the year 2000, Western science, under laboratory conditions, began to establish the fact that we are surrounded by a field of what is called unconventional energy. It permeates all of creation. It's not out there around us somewhere. It is part of us. It permeates every cell of our body and every element of creation. This field that has only been recently discovered is characterized as being everywhere all of the time. It's a field that apparently has been with us from the moment that creation began, from the time scientists call the Big Bang. And what makes this field so very, very interesting is that scientists today describe this field as having an intelligence. They say that we are permeated with an intelligent field that responds to coherent human emotion, to genuine states of heart-based emotion, joy or sadness, happiness, frustration. The field around us responds by mirroring back into our lives the very experiences that we're having within our bodies. In recent times, Western scientists have begun to call this field the mind of God. And it is in the mind of God that we begin to understand that we are, in fact, participating in the events of our lives, in the events of our world. The peace between nations, the healing in our bodies, as different as they appear, they are related through a single field of energy. And that field of energy is the subject of our program today. Well, Western science now, in looking at these relationships and these principles, has found an even deeper relationship. And it begins, not surprisingly, within our hearts. What we know is that in every moment of every day, there is a conversation going on between our hearts and our brains. It's a dialogue. There's a signal that is being generated within our hearts that is going directly to our brains, and it is the signal that tells our brains whether or not to create life-affirming or life-denying chemistry in our bodies. So for example, in our hearts, when we are feeling love, compassion, understanding, forgiveness, peace, tolerance, there's a very nice, evenly matched, rhythmic signal that we are sending as a conversation to our brain that is releasing the kinds of chemistry, the DHEA levels, for example, or the precursors to DHEA and all the hormones in our bodies that affirm life in our bodies. What studies have shown is that when in our hearts, when we can feel the feelings of gratitude and appreciation, genuine feelings of gratitude and appreciation in our hearts, those chemicals in our brains creating DHEA, the precursor to every other hormone in our bodies, actually increases over 100% over a 6-hour period of time. We didn't do anything different other than change the way we're feeling in our hearts. We didn't take a special supplement. We didn't do a special kind of exercise. We didn't have a crystal on the altar or a special elixir in the refrigerator, although all those may help in our tools and paths that lead us into the kinds of understandings that we're talking about now. The truth is, as well as they work, we probably don't need them, because everything that we need from this perspective lives within each of us already, and it's in the form of a language that we hold in our hearts that speaks to the world around us. The same studies have shown that when in our hearts we are holding the feelings of anger, rage, frustration, jealousy, we're sending a very different kind of signal to our brains, and our brains begin to release life-denying chemistry that matches the anger, the rage, the hate, the jealousy. We begin to release cortisol, for example. It is known as the stress hormone, and those rates are shown to increase over 23% within just a few hours of feeling those kinds of feelings in our bodies. So there is a conversation, there is a dialogue that is going on every moment of every day between our hearts and our brains based on what we are feeling in our hearts. And it begs us to ask the question one more time, do we really know? Are we aware of what we're feeling in our hearts? What are you feeling right now? If you're listening to this program as you're driving your car, what are you feeling in your heart as you're focused on holding your vehicle between the lines on the freeway? If you are on a busy airplane or a bus or a subway and the commotion of the people around you, what are you feeling in your heart as you're considering the possibilities of what we're sharing in this program? Well, the dialogue within our bodies is important because it creates effects that extend beyond our bodies. What we know is that as we feel the feelings in our hearts, it changes the chemistry in our brains. That brain chemistry then changes what's happening in the cells of our bodies, and the effects are registered beyond our cells on the quantum level in the field of energy that links all of creation. And by virtue of this, I'm sharing this with you because this is the reason why it is so very important for us to be aware of the feelings that we hold in our hearts, how we respond to the other people and to the events of the world around us.